As a part of opening our heart into the grand unity of existence, we of course want to be free of all our karmic bonds which keep us in our current limitations, and in that goal, the karmic axe can be a fantastic tool to help free and liberate our energy systems. So this is actually a hatchet and not exactly an axe which I'm talking about today, but I actually like this object because it has sort of tools for removing nails, and I'll get to that point later. But I actually keep this in my bedroom as a sort of a inspiration and just a subconscious reminder to my nervous system that I do have the power to cut out unwanted energies in my life. And it's a very foundational topic that I think everyone can benefit from. So, let's get into the mythology of Hinduism. If you have seen any of these Hindu gods, then no doubt you've seen that many of them have multiple arms, more than 2 arms usually, and in the arms they hold all sorts of objects. One of the most common objects you'll see all over the place is an axe of some kind. Now these can differ in look and appearance, and I'm actually not an expert in Hindu mythology, and I'm not claiming that what I'm going to be saying here is the absolute or all of the truth. But the value that I really see in the axe when it's held by one of these deities is the theme of metaphorically clearing the jungle. Because you can imagine yourself in this sort of a dreamscape. Let's imagine a dream here, where you are in a jungle and it's loud, there are insects chirping, and you can't even see 5 meters in front of you because there's just trees and vines everywhere. Now ultimately you want to become enlightened and liberated, but how can you do that when you are stuck in a jungle and you can't hear or see anything? And this is where the gift of the axe comes in, because with the axe you can chop down vines or chop out vines and chop down trees and create a clearing for yourself. And once you have a clearing, you can do all sorts of spiritual work. You can build a pyramid there, metaphorically speaking, which reaches up into the sky, into the stars, where you can access divinity. So that's just a nice little metaphorical picture for you there. But in Hindu mythology, the axe, as I think of it, is used to show how you can cut out karma, you can cut out energy from your life. And these energies tend to be the big stuff, the trees in your life. So what sort of energy or what sort of tree, what sort of karma can you cut out of your life with an axe like this? So the most common or most easiest example to go for is of course addictions, or maybe just bad habits that you want to get rid of. You know, this can be anything from drugs, obviously, or food if you eat too much, or sugar, or watching too much TV, or really anything that you would like to change about yourself, or any sort of energy or habit which you feel like is limiting your potential to grow and transform as a person. So, for example, if you have a problem with buying too much chocolate when you go to the supermarket, then you can imagine on a symbolic archetypal level, if you have this desire to walk down the aisle that sells all the chocolatey treats, maybe you see the aisle and for a moment you are wondering, should I go down there or not? And it's tempting. Well, in your head you can imagine your axe and you can feel that karmic energy connection, that desire, and you can chop it. So this is a tool that's very decisive. This is quite a small axe, but you get much bigger axes and even double-handed axes. And the main characteristic, the thing that makes the axe special from other tools, is it's got a big momentum and a big swing, and it comes down with a lot of force. So if you can, it's good to take solid big actions that cut energies out of your life. And you can use this over and over again. It's not a one-time use tool. You can use it as much as you like. An axe is a very durable tool. Now, how can you actually get good use out of it? Because it's nice to imagine that picture, and I would highly encourage you to actually envision this picture of an axe cutting the energy which you are trying to separate from yourself, because on an archetypal level I do think it works. But just to make it more effective, I would recommend keeping an axe like this, or whatever one you like, in your room perhaps. Because if you know the symbology behind the axe, then on a very subconscious level, on a very deep level, every time you see it, you're reminding your nervous system that you have the power to cut out things which you don't want in your life. And, it is a power. Power is a good thing if we use it for positive aspects of life, and cutting out our bondage, our chains, is a very good way to use our power. And maybe now for another example, I've sort of given the energetic one, but sometimes people in our lives or groups of people cause us perhaps some sort of an issue, or we feel like they're holding us back from the aspirations which we have for ourselves, whether spiritually or just in normal aspirations in life. And what I would recommend on this topic is not to think of it like cutting out people, because if you cut out a person, it feels very jarring perhaps, and it doesn't feel very heart-centered or very loving. And to me, it feels like if you think in your head you're chopping out a person, you're giving up on them. You're saying that this person is of no use, or this person cannot be saved, or something like that, and you give up on them. But that's not quite right, because everyone's heart is God at the deepest sense. So we shouldn't give up on people. But what you can totally do is cut out relationships and specific aspects of relationships that you have with people. So for instance, let's say you have a group of friends, maybe you've known them for a while, and you guys or you girls go drinking on weekends, and sometimes you drink too much, and because you've reached a stage in your life, you decide you want to cut out all this drinking, and you can't hang out with the people at the bars without drinking, because that's just not fun. So you don't have to cut out those people out of your life entirely, but you can take this karmic axe in your head and chop out this drinking energy and take a decisive action and tell everyone very firmly, I'm no longer drinking with you and I'm not interested. Don't invite me, I'm not going to drink. But that doesn't mean you have to stop hanging out with your friends. You can still do other activities with them. You can still play sports or just hang out or go for barbecues. And this goes for many, many relationships. Many people, of course, have sort of issues with their parents, and you can be sometimes direct with your parents and cut out a specific part of the relationship. And sometimes that does mean not visiting people, but a lot of the times it just means being very clear on a specific aspect of the relationship. Let's say, for instance, in your family there are lots of arguments about politics. You could be very firm and just say, I'm not talking about politics, period. So that's a very heart-centered thing to do, actually, because if you clear that up very clearly, chop off this political energy between you and your family, then it's very clear, very decisive, and then that opens up air for you to have different, more healthy relationships, aspects of relationships with your family. So sometimes you do need to cut a person out of your life completely, maybe an ex of yours or just a specific life situation, but that's very rare. Definitely do it when it needs to be done on a practical level. Sometimes you just don't want to see people at all anymore, but that would be a very rare life event. But on a more subtle level, on a more daily level with this karmic axe, you can chop out all sorts of energies that you don't want to be attached to through taking a decisive action, or just a decisive thought, a decisive decision. So I've talked a lot about this axe, but also it's not the end of the story. There's also something a bit more subtle called, let's just call it a karmic knife, where you use your consciousness, your viveka, your focus, to make even more subtle carvings. Because an axe, of course, is for chopping things like trees and vines and big stuff, but a knife is used for carving, for instance, fruits or food. And for something really more subtle, like deep inner meditations, where you're letting go of desires and alchemizing them into something slightly more healthy and just more subtle topics that don't require definitive, decisive actions, but require more subtle nuance, then on an archetypal level, you can put the axe down for delicate situations and pick up the karmic knife. But that would be a topic for another day. So yeah, I've mentioned already you can keep this in your room as a subconscious reminder for yourself so that every time you see it, you can remember you have the power to make decisive actions. But also, I would highly recommend if you feel like you need some or would like some help being more decisive in your life, then getting interested in the Hindu tradition, the Hindu religion, can be very interesting and useful. And if you go finding a Hindu deity that you sort of resonate with, and perhaps in one of the arms is holding an axe, then by learning more about that deity, studying the stories, sort of meditating on it, maybe even going as far as dreaming about the deity and just respecting it ultimately, that is really good, because the more you build a relationship with this concept, this aspect of God, this deity, then the more you will become like that, and you will get many, many gifts from it. Hopefully all the gifts that are symbolized through the items in the hands of the deity, but also one of them should be at least the axe. And the axe is very important. It's very foundational. It's one of the first sort of archetypal tools that you would use to liberate yourself. Because like I mentioned, you're clearing the forest so that you can have ground to build and work from there. So I think that's pretty much all I wanted to say about the karmic axe. I think it's a really important topic. Maybe I'll just end by saying that if you do end karma that is involved between you and other people, then I would do it with as much grace and compassion as you can. Sometimes you could just be very decisive straight away and tell people that I'm no longer hanging out with you, period, because I don't want to. And that can be okay. There is a time and a place for that. But a lot of the time we can just be a bit more delicate. The way I think of it is using a tool like a hatchet to remove the nails first and then chop, so that no one is resentful or hurt. And sometimes you can clear the air or explain it really well, or just talk from your heart, not be harsh. And that's going to be your own wisdom coming into play. You have to act from the heart and really feel what is the best course of action. But if you need to end a relationship between you and someone else, do it with as much grace and heart and compassion as you can, because it can be hurtful for other people if you end relationships. But on the other hand, as you go through life, you will almost certainly encounter other people that, to varying degrees of decisiveness, try to cut you out of their lives because they're pursuing something and they have limited time. So maybe they would cut you out of their lives. And if that happens, we can accept that with grace as well. Grace and understanding. So now really to end in conclusion, the point of this karmic axe, as I've said many times by now, is to clear that jungle, make a clearing for yourself, and then we build a metaphorical, symbolic, archetypal pyramid that reaches up into the sky, into the stars, and what's up there is of course divinity. And once we reach the divinity, we pull that back down into our bodies, into our lives, and serve the other conscious beings around us. Whoa.